Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by the man, the myth, the legend, and also the editor of thewolfpacker.com, Matt Carter. And today,
I was wondering who you were talking about.
the man, the myth, the legend, of course.
And
Well,
when you got the myth and legend part, I was like,
yeah, I was actually introducing our next guest, about our special guest that we were scheming to get maybe one day. So maybe that's our surprise, by the way, for the 1,000 subscribers. I'm going to go ahead and plug our YouTube channel now. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and as I mentioned, we're on YouTube as well. So if you want to watch our beautiful faces as we talk about Wolfpack sports, go to our YouTube channel, smash the subscribe button, like this video, and please comment while you're at it. We're already at 1,000 subscribers, so we thank you very much to our audience, and we are working on that special podcast for you. It's in the works, I promise. So anyways, let's talk about what was a very special night for Wolfpack fans. I was talking to you before this podcast, Matt. No NC State fan in the world went into this game thinking NC State was going to lay the hammer on Boston College. There may have been some optimistic NC State fans that thought that the Wolfpack would win a hard-fought game in Chestnut Hill, and for 30 minutes it was a hard-fought game. But really, when it came time for NC State to lay the hammer, we were talking about the last podcast in the Louisiana Tech game, Matt. I was saying NC State was better than Louisiana Tech that entire game, but it just never landed the knockout punch. Well, it sure landed the knockout punch in Chestnut Hill Saturday night, 21-0, outscoring the Eagles in the third quarter, and that was pretty much the ball game. You go into the fourth quarter and cruise from there. So, Matt, what do you make of this win? I think there's a couple elements. You're impressed by NC State's performance, and you're probably a little bit disappointed from what you maybe expected going into this game from Boston College. So, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I put in my column, it was like watching some kind of sports-themed version of Stranger Things from, the Netflix series. What bizarre world are we living in? What alternate universe is this where the other team is the one that's bumbling, stumbling, and can't get out of its own way, and in a crucial game is laying an egg. If I told you before the game that there was it was an important game. It was not a must-win for NC State. You and I talked about that. I felt this was a must-win for Boston College, only in the sense of the Atlantic Division of the ACC in that race. But it was a hugely important game for both teams, and I'm sure, we've been down this path before with NC State, where you get an important game and you come up empty, and you not only come up empty, you come up empty like they did at Mississippi State, where you're throwing a running back jump pass in the end zone that gets intercepted, or Bam Knight fumbles the ball on a promising opening drive in the second half.
We could have gone this entire show without mentioning the jump pass, Matt.
Well, this is the game where Boston College is the one that dropped a punt. I mean, he just literally caught it cleanly. It looked like he just dropped it when he went to the motion of punting it. This was the game where they throw an interception. This is the game where, a toss-up pass that Devin Leary probably shouldn't have thrown. Thayer Thomas just kind of snags it and just caught two BC players in bad spots after he caught it and ran for a touchdown, or where Devin Carter does that circus catch, where he's literally juggling the football behind the defensive back's back, and he doesn't even know, and then by the time the defensive back figured out what was going on, Devin Carter's in the end zone for a touchdown. It was, how often does that happen for NC State?
When you were watching that live, did you realize what was happening? That was a confusing, you had to watch the replay to see what actually happened there. Did you see it? I mean, did you see that Carter caught it live?
I was watching the game. Full disclosure, we were not at Alumni Stadium. They had agreed to give us a setup of a Zoom link for the post games. I was watching the game in my living room with my wife, who said, "Did he catch it?" And all I could think was, the ball didn't hit the ground. I never saw a ball hit the ground. And then Devin Carter had a weird reaction to it. Right? Like he just took a couple steps backwards, like, yeah, I caught it. And then maybe realized I'm not in the end zone. I got to run to the end zone. I don't know. But when he finally kind of turned around and ran to the end zone, oh, yeah, it was a delayed reaction.
Yeah.
For sure. The one thing I noticed is I never thought I saw the ball hit the ground. But I didn't quite see where the ball was either. So, yeah, that was weird. But, look, I listened to Boston College's post-game press conferences, and they the quarterback, Dennis Grossell, and Jeff Hafley, the head coach, both said, congratulated NC State. They're like, are they 33-7 better than us? I don't know about that. And honestly, there may be some truth to that, right? That was one of those games where they stumbled their way, and NC State took advantage. I think they're probably more closely matched. I do think NC State's a better team, especially without Phil Djokovic at quarterback. But I give NC State credit, too. Despite all the good things happen, they still had to walk through the door. Like Mark Rich said on Huddle, the ACC Network post-game, whatever it's called. NC State did a great job. It looked like a team that did a very good job at taking its opportunities, and it took it. And so you have to give NC State credit. And also great adjustments at halftime to shut down the run in the second half. But that's where BC was hurting NC State, and they had -3 rushing yards in the second half. So
wait, I just want to make sure we're on the same understanding here. A Dave Doran coached team made great halftime adjustments that resulted in a lopsided victory. I just want to make sure we're all on the same understanding on this.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's clear with everybody. No, because I just hear so much criticism about it. When there's a loss, that you gotta acknowledge it when it's a win. And Dave Doran is doing a hell of a job with this football team this year.
Yeah, 100% right. And look, you heard the halftime interview. Dave Doran was like, yeah, he pinpointed exactly what BC was doing. We were talking about the motion to kind of draw a guy out of the box to reduce the numbers, and then they're running out of it. It's not something they did beforehand, so they got to make the fix, and they readjust. I mean, the guy knows football. I know some NC State fans sometimes don't think that, but he knows his football. If you ever had a conversation with Dave Doran in private about football, you'd be mesmerized by how much he knows just from watching it. He eats, breathes, and sleeps football. He knows it inside out. And, they made great adjustments. I think NC State was clearly a better team than Boston College. The final score looked a little bit bigger because Boston College, I don't know what they were doing out there at times in the second half. But
it's just a more balanced team. It's a deeper team. I mean, I think when you compare the best talent to the best talent, it's not fair to. It's tough for Boston College, right? They lost their best player this season, Djokovic, early on in the year. And had Djokovic been on the field, I'd like to think that this probably would have been a closer game, a better game. Boston College would probably be a much more legitimate contender in the Atlantic Division this year. But my takeaway from this game and this week is that I think we clearly know the best 5 teams in the ACC now. I don't think there's any doubt that from the Atlantic Division, it's NC State, Wake Forest, and yes, it's still Clemson. I know Clemson lost to NC State, but they're still 4-1, 5-1, or excuse me, they have 2 losses. They have 2 losses. They lost to Georgia by a possession. I mean, Georgia's clearly the best team in the country right now. So how much are we taking away from them there? That's a defense that kept Georgia to 10 points. It's still one of the best defenses in the country. Still a top 5 ACC team, and so that's still a great win that NC State has. I think people have started to discredit that win a little bit because everyone wants to punch on Clemson this year. By the time this season's over, Clemson's going to be a top 20 team, no doubt about it. No doubt about it, in my opinion. But
it's funny to me. Clemson, real quick, Clemson beat Syracuse by a field goal. Syracuse misses a very makeable field goal, which is, if you wonder why Dabo Swinney's, I'm not trying to make light of his religion. I believe he's a very devout, religious man. That's fine. But I sometimes believe he has every reason to be devoutly religious because there's no other reason to explain why so many field goal kickers miss makeable field goals at the end of the game against Clemson. There's some kind of divine intervention that he has, that he's getting there. And but it's funny, Wake Forest jumped like 3 or 4 spots when it trailed much of the game against Syracuse. It had to rally to take the lead. They blew it, went to overtime, and then they beat Syracuse. And they bumped up like 3 or 4 spots in the poll. Now people are acting like Clemson doesn't even deserve a vote in the top 25 when they pretty much led the entire game against Syracuse. They weren't impressive, but they led the entire game. So I feel like there's a bit of a double standard going on with Clemson right now. They're not being held.
Well, the national media hates Dabo Swinney, so it's it's just the time of reckoning for Clemson. When Alabama loses 2 games one year, everybody will be waiting in line to take their hot takes on Alabama. So that's just what successful programs. That's the attention they get, but. Yeah, just ask NC State from last year. Syracuse is a tough team to beat in the Carrier Dome. I don't care how bad they suck, roster-wise. That's a tough place to play, and they're a better team than they were last year. And even that team that went, 1-7, 1-8 in ACC play, still gave NC State one hell of a ball game up in the Carrier Dome last year. Took Wake Forest to the wire, like you said, this year, and of course Clemson. So, we look at the rest of this NC State schedule. It's great. First of all, it's great that NC State has Syracuse at home. But I wouldn't necessarily, when looking at it compared to other games, like before the season, we're probably looking at Syracuse saying that's a must, that's an easy win for NC State. We're looking at that Miami game on the road. We're saying that's probably a loss for NC State. I'd probably flip those now. I'm not saying that NC State would lose to Syracuse at home, but I'm just saying I think NC State's chance of beating Miami next week are probably as good as they are of beating Syracuse at home, just because Miami's an absolute train wreck right now. But the other 2 best teams, I wanted to finish my point on the ACC. Virginia and Pittsburgh out of the Coastal clearly seem to be the cream of the crop of the Coastal. We'll see what Carolina can muster up for the rest of the year. They're out of the Coastal race for sure with, 3 ACC losses?
Yeah. They have 3, and they still have to play Pittsburgh. They still have to play NC State.
Yeah.
So, they're not very well set up.
But when we're talking about these division races, so I think it's going to be either NC State, Wake Forest, Clemson from the Atlantic, and from the Coastal, I think it's coin flip between Virginia and Pittsburgh right now. I'd probably give the edge to Pittsburgh just because Pittsburgh seems to me like a top 15 team. I mean, it might be the best team in the ACC right now. Them and NC State and Wake.
Virginia already has 2 ACC losses too, and so they're kind of, they had that bad 2-week stretch where they got crushed by Wake Forest and then got crushed by UNC, and so they've been trying to dig themselves out of that. I'll give Virginia credit. They eked out a win against Miami, eked out a win against Louisville on the road, both of those on the road, and that was kind of crucial for them to get their season back. And then obviously they crushed Duke, and you hate that it feels a little bit like the end of an era in Durham with David Cutcliffe, who's probably the most likable head coach in this area in a long time, and he's clearly got some soul searching has to be done around Duke athletics with the football program after this season, but. I wouldn't rule out Virginia Tech either in the Coastal. They only have the 1 loss to Pittsburgh, but obviously didn't look very good in that loss to Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh is basically beating Virginia away and then UNC away from having that locked up. Now, Pittsburgh does play Clemson next week, too, so that's a huge game. Of course, if Pittsburgh could defeat Clemson, that puts Clemson in a severe bind in the Atlantic. And it basically means can NC State handle business going to Wake Forest.
That's at Clemson, right?
It's at Pittsburgh, I think. I don't know.
I can't wait to see the spread for that game. Because if it's in Pittsburgh, Panthers might be favored.
I think they will be. Pittsburgh's a better team. I think Pittsburgh and NC State look like the two best teams in the ACC. I know a lot of people are going to say Wake Forest. I heard Mark Rich say last night what I've been kind of saying. That you have to remember who they played. That's not Wake Forest's fault. It's not. But just look at who they played. It's been a very soft schedule. Probably the softest of every team in the ACC. But they're also the most well-positioned because they're 4-0 in the ACC. And so of every team in the ACC, I think Wake Forest is the most well-positioned. They still have to run the last 3-game gauntlet, but the next game is Duke, that we just talked about. So Wake Forest will be 5-0 in the ACC before they play NC State, Clemson, and Boston College. So no team, in other words, we talked about, I just went over and said NC State, they're in the opposite position of NC State. NC State is in great shape if they can handle their business. Wake Forest is a game away from completely handling their business. They've taken care of all their business. They've beaten every team that we would call taking care of business type of games. And now they got to go out and beat the fellow contenders. Whereas NC State got 2 big wins over the fellow contenders. Now we're getting to the point of the schedule where they have to start taking care of business. And how well they do that over the next 4 weeks, I think. Yeah, 4 weeks will determine an awful lot about this football season.
There's also an element of Wake Forest being the lone undefeated team remaining in the ACC that I think has some people just looking at the standings and saying, well, they're undefeated, so they're the best team in the ACC. Maybe true by the end of the season. We don't know. I mean, they control their own destiny, but so does NC State. And it would be, not that NC State fans would ever want to see this scenario, but if Wake Forest ran the table and they're an undefeated ACC champion, that would just be they'd be in the college football playoff. They'd have to be, and it would be. But then you make the case for an NC State. Like, I know, again, this isn't a likely scenario. I don't expect NC State to run the table, but it is an interesting conversation in the sense that if NC State were to run the table and win the ACC championship, where would they be in the college football playoff conversation as a one-loss ACC champion? Because you look at all these teams that are ranked, basically every week a team in the top 5 is losing a game, it seems like. Iowa just lose this week. It's looking likely that you're going to have a one-loss champion out of the Big Ten. It's looking likely that nobody's going to leave the SEC undefeated. Obviously, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to get in at least one apiece. You look at the Big 12, Oklahoma, we'll see if they can run the table. Pac-12 is not looking like it's going to for sure get somebody in the playoffs. So it's interesting. I think we could see some different teams finally in the college football playoff this year, starting with the fact that Clemson won't be in it. But let's stop talking so much big picture and let's talk a little bit more about the game itself.
I just wanted to very briefly touch you. I was looking at ESPN's FPI while you're going over that, and they now have NC State as at least a 50% favorite in every single game left in the regular season. And
Wow.
60% or better. Well, the Wake Forest is 56.5%. No, actually, Miami, they have at the lowest odds for NC State, which is puzzling to me, but they have it at 50.9%.
That has to be a computer.
On the Miami game.
That's a computer, I think, bias towards just preseason. It has to be because Miami's just.
Yeah.
Miami's not a. Miami's a Florida State, right? And they're not even a Florida State right now. They're not playing the same players that they were at the beginning of the season. De'Aaron King shutting it down for the rest of the year. There was that comment by Manny Diaz last week where there might be some tension in the locker room after Manny Diaz. I think he said De'Aaron King was opting out for the rest of the season by electing to get surgery. Kind of a
opting to have surgery, I think is what he said.
And it was
De'Aaron King tweeted back like opting, with a question mark.
Yeah, so it just not a good look. There might be some tension there. They're playing a lot of young players, so looking ahead a little bit to next week before we talk more about this game, because this is the Postgame Reflections podcast. If you're just tuning in, but an experienced, deep, well-coached NC State team should be able to go down to Coral Gables or Miami Gardens, or I guess they're playing it in Hard Rock Stadium, and go down and take care of what seems to be a plagued Miami program right now. But where do you want to start with this game from yesterday? Do you want to start on the offense or defense? Because I think there's impressive notes to take away from both sides of the ball in this game. Well, since you're on your phone, I'm going to pick offense. We're going to start with the offense first, Matt. You're good.
I was just reading where Ed Orgeron is out at LSU. Sorry, it caught my eye.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't blame you. That's pretty crazy. Shows you fans, man. They love you when you're winning. They hate you when you're losing. The man won a national championship a couple years ago. Look where he is now. Although he did have Joe Brady as his offensive coordinator, but offense. I think we're seeing exactly what we said going into this season. This NC State team needs from Devin Leary to have a successful year. We're seeing it right before our eyes. Leary is being an efficient, quality ACC quarterback. I'm not saying I'm not saying he's an NFL guy right off the gate right now. I'm not saying that he's in contention for any type of prestigious awards or anything like that, but he is playing like an above average, good, potentially great college quarterback right now. 251 yards, completed 66% of his passes, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions against a pretty good Boston College defense. So I think it starts there, Matt. Is Leary, where is he stacking up to your preseason expectations so far this year?
Oh, better than I thought. You're kind of what stands out is the consistency of what he's doing week in, week out right now. I thought we would see this perhaps a lot of the time during the season. I also thought we were going to see games where it didn't click and that we would still see some of that up and down. He has never started a full season, as hard as that may seem. It seems like he's been a 3-year starter, but the reality is he took over about midway through 2 years ago, and then we started a handful of games last year before he got hurt. So, I thought, other than the pass that he got away with Thea Thomas, which I don't think I'm sure they're going to look at film and say, look, nice job, but don't do that again. Got away with it once. Don't try to get away with it a second time. Right now, if I were looking at the ACC, All-ACC teams, obviously Kenny Pickett at Pittsburgh, his first team All-ACC. He might even be in the Heisman mix now.
He is in the Heisman mix.
Yeah. Brennan Armstrong at Virginia is probably clear-cut second team All-ACC right now. And then you got to say who's third team All-ACC, because you need 3, right? Sorry, I hit my computer there. You need 3.
We know who's probably going to get it, right?
We know who's probably going to get the vote because of his name.
Yeah.
Just because of his name, and he's doing things good. Sam Howell, who we're obviously talking about at UNC, has done good things running the football this year. It kind of added a new dimension. But I haven't done it. I'd be curious to match up the numbers of Devin Leary with Sam Howell at this point.
That sounds like a job for our friends at Tuffy Talk. If our friends at Tuffy Talk are listening right now, they're big stack up Leary, Sam Howell guys. So I want to see that tweet, Tuffy Talk. Anyways, go ahead.
So that's the one I'm curious, because the big thing to me right now, one guy is the quarterback of a team that's 5-1 and 2-0 in the ACC, and we're recording this podcast. The polls will be coming out shortly. We'll probably be top 20 in both polls this week. The other one is the quarterback of a team that is going to have to find a way to win to win one of 3 games left between Pittsburgh, Notre Dame, and NC State to be bowl eligible. They're going to be Wofford or Furman. I think they play some FCS team right before they play NC State. They got to beat one of Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, Notre Dame, and NC State to get bowl eligible, and they're probably underdogs in all 4. So To me, that's the biggest thing, right? But you could make a strong case that Devin Leary should be third-team All-ACC quarterback right now. Go back to what we talked about at the beginning of the season. A lot of the success rests on the efficiency and the consistency of Devin Leary. All the other pieces look like they were there. How Devin Leary was going to bounce back from a broken leg and do as a full-time starter was going to tell you what this team and what this season would be. And so far, so good. And I'll add this too, the emergence of Devin Carter. He had one bad drop there that could have been a fumble, has really helped. He's really, when they landed Devin Carter, they thought they had a huge steal. When he got to NC State, they thought he had huge potential. Yeah, I remember them telling me once this guy going to be the next big receiver at NC State, the next in the line of big-time receivers they had. And you're now starting to see that coming together. I mean, it's starting to look more and more like what they saw. I mean, if he can take another step forward next year, he could be one of the best, I think, receivers in the ACC. And so you're seeing that, and, because Emeka Emezi didn't really have a great game last night.
Well, he got one catch stolen from him.
Yeah. That was a bang play. I didn't think it was as obvious as everybody else did, but
that was your classic Emeka Emezi go up and get it, big fella kind of catch. He had it. I don't know. Anyways.
It looked to me like he was tucking it away, and I don't know. Anyway, but
what are you supposed to do as a receiver? You're supposed to tuck it away.
But what was that? But you had said that Devin Leary was going to have all that success, and Emeka Emezi basically had one catch. I mean, they gave him that second catch to get the record, right? When the game was already over.
His security blanket.
Huh?
Yeah. Emezi's his security blanket. That's his dude.
Yeah. And so if you tell me Leary did all of that with Emezi making one catch, basically, when it mattered during that game, it just shows you that the other receivers are stepping up big time.
It also helps when you throw a pass that could have been intercepted, maybe should have been intercepted, and Thayer Thomas takes it 79 yards to the house, to make it a 24-point game at that point. So
that was amazing quick reflexes by Thomas, because that ball was floating up there, and I think you had there was another state guy and two BC guys, and I think they were all kind of waiting for the ball to get there. And Thayer Thomas was basically like, screw that, and just literally it almost looked like he cut the ball off, like he just went up there and snagged it.
Yeah.
He said, I'm taking this, and just took it away from everybody who was kind of waiting for it to come down a little bit, and then that. It was a beautiful play by Thayer Thomas, but yeah, don't throw that pass again.
Thayer Thomas is a hell of an athlete. I feel like I don't know what his draft stock is. I don't know if he's a guy that will be drafted, but if he somehow if he doesn't get drafted, and I think he probably will be, maybe like a late round pick. I mean, he seems like a prototypical Belichick scooping him up. If he goes undrafted, I'm just waiting for the headline of the Patriots have signed undrafted free agent Thayer Thomas, and you know what? I just feel like he's a dude that's gonna find a way to make it, because he's just a playmaker. He is a quarterback's best friend. He makes bad passes look good, just like he did last night. And you know what? You got to go back several years back to his childhood, and you got to thank his parents for making him a multi-sport athlete. Remember when we had that conversation last year, Matt, with Thayer about him being a gymnast? Him and Drake doing gymnastics as children. I think he has some grace to his game, Thayer Thomas. And, I'd like to think that might have part to do with it. Just, him being such a multi-dimensional athlete from, growing up and everything. And then you got Lex coming in a couple years from now. So the Thomas lineage continues in the NC State football program. But anyways, let's talk about his brother's side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, where I said it in my pregame prediction, Matt. This NC State, you throw out what you saw in the second half against Louisiana Tech. This NC State defense is going to come to Chestnut Hill. It's going to return to form, and that's exactly what it did. Shuts out Boston College to 7 points. I get it. Grossell is not the same quality quarterback that a Djokovic, led Boston College team would have presented to this Wolfpack defense. But, that Zay Flowers guy you're talking about is one of the best receivers in the ACC. His stat line, 2 receptions for 7 yards. So I think NC State did a pretty good job taking care of one of the best receivers in the ACC. And, that secondary was just flying around.
The thing that you can talk all you want about having one of those good days, right? NC State had one of those good days. I forgot to mention when the review did go in NC State's favor with Emeka Emeji on a potential fumble. Could have changed how the game was looking at halftime or played out in the second half, for sure. But what you cannot deny is that NC State completely shut down Jay Flowers like no other team probably had. And 2, completely shut down Boston College running game in the second half to -3 yards. At halftime, they had 100 yards rushing against a defense that was averaging, giving up 92 a game this year. And you thought, well, NC State, there are a lot of questions about have they played any good running teams yet? Is that a number that's skewed? Maybe it's skewed. First time they play a running team, they're giving up yards. Second half, -3 yards. Yeah, that's amazing. And so they end up giving up 97 yards. So, yeah, the average will go up. But instead of going up like 10 or 12 yards, it's probably going up a fraction of a point after this game. That's talent, right? That's ability, that's coaching, that's depth, that's everything. And so that just speaks to it. That further solidifies NC State's standing as a defense. And, we talked a lot of big picture, but it is important to note that there are only a couple of offenses on the schedule left where you would say that's an offense that, based on what we've seen out of this defense, could take advantage of NC State's defense. You're playing a true freshman quarterback next week with Miami. Florida State is not necessarily a great offense. Syracuse certainly is not a very good offense, even though they have one of the best ACC running backs. Louisville, okay offensively, but nothing great. So really down to Wake Forest and a very streaky UNC team when it comes to defending good offenses down the schedule. So this game further solidifies that this defense can take NC State, to my opinion, can take NC State a long way this season. And they did it with them interesting. Clearly during the bye week, they made a decision. We're going to play Aiden White now at corner. I mean, normally you don't mess with the good thing. But Shaheem Battle came off the sideline and basically split reps with Derek Pitch, while Aiden White got all the reps on the other side of the field. And clearly Devin Boykin, who was probably the MVP last night, with the concentrated effort to get him onto the field, playing more and splitting reps at safety.
Got to find ways to put your best athletes on the field.
So, kudos to the defensive coaches for that. They've been so good defensively. You think, we're just going to keep rolling on, doing what we're doing. No, they made changes. They switched things up. They saw a younger guy. Both of those are second-year true freshmen. These guys should deserve more reps. We could be even better if we take the chance on them. And they did. And other than Aiden White getting absolutely run over by the Boston College running back that one time, two of them had a really good game. And obviously Boykin was Boykin single-handedly probably turns the game around, right? He breaks up the pass in the end zone on what looks like an open tight end. They missed a short field goal. State comes down and scores to take a 10-7 lead at halftime, and then he picks up the fumble and alertly returns it for a touchdown to start the second half. So he's responsible for about a 14-point swing himself in that game.
It's huge. It's huge. I mean, when you have 2 units, really 3 units that at any point can go up and get you points, that's a good football team. The defense can score you points, special teams can score you points, and obviously this offense has been capable to score its fair share of points. Going into this game, we talked about the keys for NC State to win this game. Win the battle at the line of scrimmage, take care of the football, win the turnover margin. and win special teams. They did all of that. I mean, you would have liked to see maybe a little less penalties, but look at the stats. NC State, 3 sacks, Boston College 1. I think clearly NC State won the battle at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball last night. You look at the turnovers. 2 Boston College turnovers, 0 NC State turnovers. It's huge. It's huge. And here's another key stat. Inside 20 punts, 5 of them for NC State last night. Just 1 for Boston College. NC State, when it wasn't scoring points, that offense was putting the defense in good positions to have success. They were constantly winning, the field game. So, it's complimentary football. Dave Dorn said it in the post-game press conference. He keeps going back to it. This is a team that can win multiple different ways. It's a team that won multiple different ways last year, and that's the kind of team that you need to win championships, whether it be conference championships or beyond. So, Wolfpack fans, just sit back and enjoy the show this year. I think we're seeing the makings of what could be a very, very special season. There's still a lot of work to do, but I mean, sitting here after 6 games, NC State's 5-1, including wins over Clemson and Boston College, 2-0 in ACC play. I mean, yeah, you would have loved to go back and get that Mississippi State game. I'm sure everybody'd be even more excited about NC State had they won that game. But you know what? I think any NC State fan in the world would have taken this 6-game start, if offered at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing too. I thought we also talked about, and it proved to be true, to get a lead on BC, that was huge because you forced them to become one-dimensional. And the one thing Clemson did to BC was they basically made Grossell beat you. I thought Grossell played better this game than he did against Clemson. And he wasn't helped by some drops. But bottom line is that proved to be true. Once you got a lead on BC, they're not built to come back against it. In this particular matchup, it was going to be hard for them to come back against NC State. And so, if they had gotten that lead by the first, second quarter, it might have been a lot stress-free, relaxed, and even more fun. But we saw that once Jeff Hafley said himself, once it got to 24-7, he had a feeling the game was over. In a nutshell is what he said. So, and Dave Dorn said himself after the game, they're not built, they being Boston College, are not built to come back, especially in the weather when it was raining. And you're forcing them to have to throw the football in the rain and be one-dimensional. So, everything we talked about they had to do, they did, and they did well.
And that drive that made it 24-7, that was a grown man's drive from NC State. I mean, that included multiple just 10, 12-yard runs. I know Bam Knight in the red zone got a reception and broke it off for a first down when he probably should have been tackled for maybe a 3 or 4 yard gain. Broke a couple tackles, gets inside the 5-yard line. I mean, that was a break your will kind of drive for NC State. I'm trying to look up how long that drive was. Let's see, 7 plays, 61 yards. Yeah.
That was after the Isaiah Moore interception.
Right. Yep. I mean, it was just run it down your throat. We're better than you. We're beating you in the line of scrimmage. And when it's one thing to do that to South Florida. It's one thing to do that to Furman. It's another thing to do that to Boston College. So, an impressive win. NC State fans, you should be happy and get excited for Miami next week. We're going to have another podcast coming up this week previewing that game. Let's give out our game balls, Matt, before we sign off here. I think I have an idea of who you're going to give yours to, so I'll let you go ahead and do it.
Yeah, Devin Boykin. It's rare to see that midway through the year you add it. I mean, and the defense that had been hit by attrition with injuries, to C.J. Clark at nose tackle and Peyton Wilson at linebacker and Cyrus Fagan at safety, looked like it may have added a piece to the mix down the stretch with Devin Boykin. He's not an unknown. He played as a true freshman, got a chance to start a game or two as a true freshman last year. This is his second year as a true freshman, technically. Boykin's a kid I've been high on since the NC State got him. He's the son of a coach. He's athletic. He was an offensive player of the year in the conference one year, defensive player of the year in the conference another year, so he's clearly just a baller. I thought he was underrated and under-recruited coming out of high school. He looked good. Right place, right time on the fumble, scoop and score, I get it. But, there were some other plays he made that were really good plays. And I guess I should look at his stat line so everybody knows how well he plays. But let's see. He ended up with 3 tackles, 2 pass breakups. And they were big pass breakups and obviously the special team touchdown. So
defensive stat lines are never completely indicative of the performance, right? You make 2 plays that change the game on defense, you're the player of the game.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, it's tough to beat your guy as the player of the game, but I'm gonna give mine to somebody that I don't think we have given one to yet, Devin Leary. He did what he had to do. It wasn't like it's not a vintage performance. When you think about Leary's best performance to date, you still think about the Pittsburgh game last year on the road with the 4 touchdowns and the game-winning drive and the 330-plus yards, or maybe you think about the Clemson game where he completes huge passes down the stretch to win that game in overtime. But this isn't going to be the first game that comes to mind for people when they think about Devin Leary. Looking back on his college career years down the road, but this is a game where he led the offense to do exactly what it needed to do. He didn't turn the ball over, which was a huge element. I mean, 1 pick in this game could have, if it happened before the midway point of the third quarter, a pick could have changed the entire element of the game. 3 touchdowns, completes 66% of his passes, 250, 260 yards, 251 to be exact. I mean, he had a quarterback rating of 195.8. That's pretty impressive. So, Devin Leary's my game ball. Devon Boykin, your game ball. Listeners, viewers at home, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen or watch us. If you listen to our podcast, we're on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you like to watch us, go to our YouTube channel. Please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, even if you don't watch. If you're just a loyal consumer of the Wolfpacker Podcast, you don't watch YouTube, just go over to YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It'd help us out a ton. Drop a comment if you're at it. A lot of good comments to have after this game. Go Pack, Devin Leary, hell of a game. I mean, come on. I want to hear your analysis. I want to hear the takes from the listeners, so drop them in the comments on YouTube. Follow us on social media. You can follow our main account on Twitter at the Wolfpacker. You can follow me personally if you wish at Justin H. Will. And you can give us a like on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on thewolfpacker.com. So for Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.